As a Muslim, it's a requirement to learn your religion. You can't just say I'm Muslim and then ignorantly follow without having knowledge. So knowledge is very, very important. But also equally important is to make sure that knowledge is from a right source. And if you don't have proper knowledge from a right source, you can be easily misguided.
Basically, since the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there has been that question, who is one taking their knowledge from? What is the basis of the knowledge that one is taking? That's probably the biggest challenge, the authenticity, that there's sound scholarship. Because one of the checks and balances that Islam has in terms of scholarship is ijma', which is the consensus of the scholars. So if someone goes outside of the consensus, then it becomes problematic as to whether that knowledge is authentic.
If you look at some of the propaganda of ISIS, they weren't talking to you about violence. In their initial propaganda, it wasn't about that. It was about coming and living in a place where you matter. Come and live in a place where you can participate in building this new society. It's almost like they were employing the best graphic designers. You know, colors associated with life and vibrancy and all of that kind of thing looked beautiful. The wording that they used, the language was really good as well. Let's just say it was very professionally done.
I deal personally with a lot of people that have been caught up in a lot of what we would call extremism or terrorism. And when you talk to them, a lot of them have a lot of regrets in that they now look back and see that they were actually very ignorant of their faith, but they were very emotionally affected by events overseas and they wanted to make a difference. So they actually start off as being very sincere, but that sincerity turned to misguidance because they didn't get the sort of the guidance from a proper source. And now they look back with deep regrets. The recent re-establishment of the ISIS Caliphate was a false caliphate. It's not a true caliphate. And it's not based on proper Islamic jurisprudence. And it wasn't recognized by all Islamic leaders worldwide, religious leaders, political leaders. But because the issue is very political and very emotional and innocent people are being killed in that region for a long time and doesn't seem to be a solution in sight, and this thing appeared from the outside appearance, oh, is this the real caliphate re-emerging again? Look, they're standing up for Muslims, they're standing up for innocent people, they dress like Muslims, they speak like Muslims, they're using all Islamic symbolism in their flag and they're upholding Sharia. And for someone that doesn't have much knowledge, such a young person that's very emotionally driven and standing up for injustice, this looks like an amazing concept. But once you start looking beyond the superficial, and if you have knowledge, then you quickly realise this is a very dangerous, it's a satanic movement, not a religious movement.
Look at the known learned scholars around the world. How many of them actually stood up and supported ISIS and said, okay, this is a good initiative, this is a good idea, let's go? I don't know any. ISIS managed to dupe a number of people because they didn't have sufficient learning and they didn't learn to trust the people in their community enough.
So in this day and age with Shake Google phenomena, it is confusing sometimes to try and ascertain what is real knowledge and what's from a reliable source and what's not.
Just because a website says it's islam.com.au or whatever it might be, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is. Everyone has to make their own investigations, ask other scholars, get a varied amount of opinions about certain things. Do even a Google search, it's okay on that person. Who were their scholars? Where did they study? Who recognises this individual as a person who can teach and give decisions about what Islam is and give what they call rulings about masail, they're called in Arabic, rulings about what's halal and what's haram and what's otherwise.
But the best way is to try and find someone in the real world, in your local community, that can sit there and tell you who their teacher was and who their teacher was and their teacher was, all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad. Peace be upon him. So that's the traditional way of attaining knowledge.
In order that the knowledge one gets isn't just words and it isn't just information, but it's actual wisdom, and it helps a person progress in life and become enlightened.
And the Prophet, peace and blessings upon him, he taught us that طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلمة. The seeking of knowledge is compulsory upon every believing man and woman. A person who doesn't seek knowledge, then he risks falling into sin.
Let's not fall into the trap when the next ISIS comes along.